Morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Coffee with Cory. I'm your host, Cory Smith, here to discuss some NC State football with Michael Clark. Michael, the transfer portal window has officially opened. It's one transfer portal window this time around. I know you're thankful for that. I'm sure, NC State coaches are thankful for that. Maybe not every college coach across the country is thankful for that because you do add some players typically in the spring transfer portal window, and NC State had a lot of success with that. But just before we really jump into things, man, just your thoughts on the spring transfer or this transfer portal window and only having one this offseason.
Yeah, I guess it's better, but we were just talking offline before we started this podcast. I mean, it is a cluster amongst other things. I mean, you've got players that's not NC State specific, book officials, book officials, cancel. I mean, until a player gets on a plane, it does not matter. And that's the hardest thing. I mean, things can change.
Can a plane reroute? Is that?
Yeah. I mean, exactly. And, it's probably not out of the question to land somewhere and see a better offer come through on your phone from your agent and be like, well, I'm not going on this visit. I know that sounds crazy, but there's nothing binding these players to take these visits. There's nothing binding anybody to these deals that they quote unquote sign. We saw how that worked last year when there was a mass exodus in the secondary for NC State. Guys supposed to come back, then it doesn't for whatever reason. I think that it feels like this is the year where something has to give. This cannot continue. It is almost impossible to manage at this point for teams, for even the players. I mean, Cory, you've got players visiting 5 schools in 5 days, and you're going to make them one of the most important decisions in your life, especially some of these guys who consider themselves maybe your own NFL radars or trying to improve their draft stock. It's just wild to me that you have to and make no mistake. I think what people need to understand on these visits, when guys are showing up, these teams are going to push you to commit while you're there. This has to move fast. So I'm not saying you move on from a kid if you don't get him on the official, but if you're NC State or anybody else, you have to address needs. You really don't have a choice but to squeeze any. I'm not saying necessarily squeeze guys, but you have to say, look, man, I know this is crazy, but we need in 24 hours need to kind of know where you stand because we have got to address tight end, for instance. We have got to address linebacker. And, we've got, 2 weeks to do so. And I think another thing to point out is you better make your hay early in this deal because we saw how watered down the transfer portal got last year, and I saw a tweet from Chris Hummer last night around midnight. What was it, 31 players were in, and then another 500 went in a span of so little time. I forgot the amount. Yeah, it was just wild. I mean, in conventional math, wisdom, whatever you want to say, there's only a certain number of spots, even with the 105, and you've already got most teams already have enough dead weight on their roster. You see teams across the country pushing guys out the door. It's really a monumental task to try to construct a roster or to be a college football coach. Anything in college football right now is chaos.
Yeah, and as we've already seen, NC State, both the offensive and defensive side of things have already scheduled. Well, it's funny because we were talking about this beforehand, and you mentioned it a little bit there. But NC State had already scheduled several official visits and worked to schedule them anyways. Had plane tickets, everything ready to go, and had to cancel some of those because, again, that's how fluid this situation is. That's how quickly things can change the transfer portal. Somebody gets an offer from a school they really wanted, and they're like, all right, everybody else is out. I'm going to this school and probably taking a visit there. Yeah, go ahead. You can talk on that.
I think it is important to understand, and this is not just NC State, but talking to guys and buddies who work in college football around the country. The word fluid is always used in recruiting, but it's almost right now that doesn't do it justice. These kids are looking for the best. And in fairness to them, I don't blame them. Go get as much money as you can, and if another offer comes through that kind of trumps what you've got going on, go get the money. And there's not a set time. And then another trickle-down thing you're going to have to deal with, Cory, is certain kids say they take a visit here, the school misses on them, a big blue blood school misses. Okay, well, then that trickles down, and maybe a guy NC State was targeting and has on campus all of a sudden gets a X offer from, I'm just throwing a school out there, Ohio State or somebody like that.
Yeah.
then he goes from feeling great about NC State feels great about him to no shot. And that is the hardest thing to manage right here. And again, I think the biggest thing, and it's going to be across the country, get guys on campus. These official visits are not going to be 48 hours. I mean, you're talking about 24 hours. You pretty much have to know where you stand with the guy. I just don't think you can sing around and dance and say, we'll get back to you, or we'll give you a couple of days. That's not how this is going to work.
Yeah. Other thing I wanted to add too, obviously for NC State, you do have 2 official visits already set now at this point. One of which, Daveon Crouch, Bam Crouch, a guy that, looking to leave Boston College, was a team captain this past year. The prior year, 77 total tackles, which is a career high for him. Had 6.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks on the season. Had a breakout game in the Fenway Bowl, or the Pinstripe Bowl. I apologize to those 2 teams if they have like a rivalry over which bowl game they have. But he was able to have a breakout game there. 4 games played this past season. He's obviously a guy that at the linebacker position has a great chance to really kind of push to get back to where he was the previous season. So yeah, I think for Bam Crouch, obviously somebody that's a high priority for NC State. They're bringing him in this upcoming week. Just your thoughts on first of all, where NC State stands here, because obviously you're getting the first visit. That's a pretty key one, but also how high of a priority this is, given the fact that you're losing Caden Fordham from this past season.
Well, I just think linebacker in general is a pretty big need. Caden Fordham really played well down the stretch, but I think the linebacker group as a whole was pretty underwhelming for most of the year. You didn't have the horsepower nor the depth that you needed. They've got to land multiple guys, I think, ideally you land a headliner. You land at least one guy that you feel is like an all-ACC type candidate. But NC State cannot afford to not bring in multiple guys to compete for a spot in the 2 deep. You've got to be better there to compete. I mean, if we saw anything yesterday, Cory, in the CFP, semi or quarterfinals, it really all starts up front and shortly and behind that defensive line. NC State's really got to shore up the linebacker room. I mean, I know Kenny Soares can potentially come back. Good player, wouldn't classify him as a no-brainer type all-ACC type guy. I know he played well down the stretch. I personally think he's more of a third linebacker if you're playing 2. I don't see it at his age. Again, I just think NC State has to find a way to get difference makers in their defense on all 3 levels. You did not have the playmaking ability, the ability to generate turnovers, all the things that you need to be one of the better defenses in the ACC. It just simply wasn't there. So, again, you can say you're bringing quality over quantity. You have to heavily invest, I think, up front first, and you may have to overpay for a linebacker or 2. But I think State needs to bring in multiple guys at the second level.
Yeah, and again, he was a guy that I mentioned the breakout season as a junior, and actually started off the season really strong during what would have been his final season if he hadn't only played in 4 games due to injury. But a pick 6 at the beginning of the season for Boston College. Also had 12 tackles over the course of 4 games. Returned against Notre Dame, wasn't able to play the rest of the way. But again, you're looking for somebody that can have that kind of playmaking material. And be a standout player. Not, obviously you want him to be potentially a starter, but also has a chance to be, if you have other players that step up, I mean, would be a huge piece for NC State this upcoming season if you were able to get him.
Well, I think what you're selling at NC State, obviously, because this is a kid that's probably going to attract significant interest from other schools, is the opportunity you just hinted on. I mean, it's wide open for you to come in and play, assuming he's the player that he's shown in the past. There's a spot, a starting job wide open for him. Now, I think in a lot of these cases, if money's going to be a big factor, the key for NC State in a situation like that is to make sure you are competitive financially, because if you're competitive financially and you can offer him the opportunity to pretty much walk in, let's call it what it is, and be a starter, that's going to be much more appealing. But the numbers have to add up, and then again, you just have to cross your fingers that, schools with more money don't miss on other targets and then come and throw that person, whoever it may be, more money.
Yeah, and sorry, we're getting a whole bunch of notifications right now. I know both of us are getting updates. As far as players that are entering the transfer portal, we'll put this. This is pre-recorded. We'll put this out live here shortly. But another name to know that's entered the transfer portal from NC State, missed the entire past season, but Rente Hinton, a safety that will enter the transfer portal, out of NC State. So, and then Val Erickson, that I think we previously reported, Terrell Anderson officially in the portal, along with Noah Rogers and Hollywood Smothers. So, a lot of these were previously known names, but Rente Hinton, a new one for NC State that you lose out of the secondary. But again, didn't play at all this past season due to injury and was just a very minimal contributor for NC State over the past few seasons prior to that. All right, let's move over to the offensive side of the football. NC State, their first, a visitor that will be, or I don't know, we'll see. Maybe they host somebody before then, but January 9th through the 10th, the first, one on the books for, kind of a playmaker would be Gavin Harris, a tight end from New Mexico State. Obviously, as we're talking about, things can change, but as of right now, he's on the books for NC State, trying to bring him in. A guy that was a full-fledged starter for New Mexico State this past year, 37 receptions on 65 targets. So, again, a move tight end for NC State potentially if you were trying to bring him in. Average 14.6 yards per reception, 541 total yards this past season. And the big number, the fact that you're kind of looking for a player that can add this after losing Justin Jolie this past season, 197 yards after the catch and after contact. You're looking for a guy that you could potentially bring in like that. 5 contested catches this past season too. So, and then, only 4 missed tackles forced, but again, you got to go back and actually watch film on him. And let's figure out, what those led to, but just your thoughts on not only, again, kind of the same thing we talked about with Crouch, not only the fact that you're bringing him in, but also, what you can sell to him too, because the tight end room at NC State this past season was one of, if not the best in the country. There's a reason why Gavin Locklear was named tight end coach, the best tight end coach in the country by Pro Football Scoop this past offseason too.
Yeah, I mean, you have to find a difference maker. You're obviously going to be in the market for receivers. I think, though, you have to make a substantial investment in a big-time tight end. I don't know if you can get one of Justin Jolie's caliber. This kid's obviously a really good player, though. Dante Daniels is going to just file the waiver, however you want to word it. I mean, barring someone foreseen, I think he'd be able to come back. Everybody else seems to who does it. That said, you've got some young guys in the room that you like, but with everything that's riding, and this is assuming you can get C.J. Bailey to publicly or whatever, whenever you get him to come back. And again, I feel like that's trending in NC State's direction. Still not an announcement, which makes you wonder, but that's where it is. Yeah, you have to get this. There are just certain positions, I think, in this cycle that they have to land. I mean, in tight end, a big play tight end. I'd also think a receiver or two that could push for a spot on the 2 deep. And just going real quick, offensive line, probably going to take 3. I think it's going to be the 3 best available. I mentioned running back. You probably have to add at least 1 running back with the loss of Hollywood Smothers. I know you like some young guys and feel like they can contribute, but you're essentially going to address every position if you're NC State for the most part in the transfer portal. Some have more heavily than others, but you have to do this from a depth standpoint. It's hard enough to compete as the season goes on. And regardless of what you do, Cory, the tough spot that you're going to run into, and so will every other team, is by the end of the year, if there are injuries, you're going to be subject to playing freshmen like NC State was on the back end. That's something you're trying to kind of guard against in your approach here. But I think we all understand that, having the depth that maybe certain teams are accustomed for, having time to develop, those days are over. What I'm saying is you better hit on these picks and who you're paying. You've got to pay the right people. You got to get the right people. And you got to keep your fingers crossed, first of all, that they show up, and second of all, on campus, and then second of all, that they perform at the level that you have, because State's in the past had a lot of money tied up in some guys who've been injured, and obviously you can't control that, but once that happens or they underperform, that money's dead. And NC State does not have a surplus of cash like some schools where they can afford for one or two of their highest paid guys to suck, per se.
Yeah, and you touched on it too. Like, let's also touch on the topic of CJ Bailey, because you mentioned it earlier in the week. I believe it was New Year's Eve. Actually, you put out a portal update, or not a portal update, but kind of an update on where things stand. It's hard to like use the language here, because you want to say like a portal update, but it's not like these guys are in the portal. You're just trying to keep them out. So, but
that's the most ridiculous part about all this. If you think about it, not to cut you off, schools can't openly communicate with players, and they officially can't go in the portal until the 2nd. But we all know behind the scenes for the past, 2-3 weeks, even a month, there's been conversations between schools and agents.
Yeah.
That's how this is working. There's a lot of back channeling going on. You can't just schedule official visits this morning, even though the portal opened, and say, we're going here. This has been in the works. And that's it's all just so ridiculous to even talk about. Like, we can't talk to you, but we want you to come visit, but we got to talk to your agent. I mean, it's just crazy. And we know the tampering's going on. I mean, this has all become almost a joke at this point. College football is begging for an overhaul here. A commissioner has been talked about for years. At some point, there's got to be some type of legislation and some common sense used.
What is that? I don't know.
I don't know. And I don't think a lot of the folks involved do either, because this is, again, man. And like I said, I think it's important to let the people listen to this podcast, and more importantly, our subscribers, is, guys, we're going to do the best we can. We're not, it's just going to be chaos. There is no roadmap for this. There is no playbook. And, I think schools, as crazy as it sounds, they're being blindsided left and right, from guys transferring to guys visiting to guys not visiting to guys maybe wanting to come back. I mean, there's just so many moving parts. It's hard to tell what's real and what's not.
Yeah, and another aspect too, I wanted to really touch on. I know I just kind of mentioned it, but CJ Bailey, how big of a need is it to bring him back and try to and go ahead and have this figured out at the very least, because you're now, I mean, the transfer portal is now officially open. If you're not bringing him back, if you're not able to get him back, and not have this decided quickly, I mean, you're pushing yourself further and further outside of the quarterback market here, right? I mean, there's already teams scheduling official visits with quarterbacks. You're already trying to bring them in and go ahead and have this finalized. If you're NC State, and you don't end up getting things done with CJ Bailey, you're kind of behind the 8 ball, right?
Yeah, you are. And I think that's probably going to be the first dominoes to fall. All the schools that are pursuing high-level quarterbacks or have a returning quarterback, the number one thing you want to do is get that guy in the fold, whether he's on campus or he's a potential transfer. Everything trickles down from there. Interestingly, when it comes to CJ, talking to people kind of behind the scenes, the amount of weight he carries on the team, I know that shouldn't come as a surprise, but as a quarterback, but it feels like his decision is going to impact so many others on both sides of the ball. He's that galvanizing force, and some people are split on him. I mean, I thought all of the thought of trying to get another quarterback or not pay. I mean, I think you have to pay CJ Bailey. I think you have to get him in the fold. And at the same time, the people who at the time thought he played, need to have some poor games. State's got to invest in CJ Bailey, but also invest in the pieces around him. More importantly, up front. I mean, offensive guard, they're nowhere near as good as they need to be there this past year. I'm not sure those answers are on the roster, especially if you move Spike Sauls Jr. to center. That's an issue, assuming you can get Jacarius Peak and Tegan Anderson to re-sign. Well, then you got to put a lot of money into both your guards. And I know that may not sound right, but if they're not any better there, you're not going to be any better next year. I mean, it was not good this past season. You have got to pay guys. They need to be proven guys. And even if you have to overpay a little bit, you add 2 really, really good guards, and you could potentially have one of the better offensive lines in the ACC. And that's the only way NC State's going to compete. And really any school that's not a, blue blood program, you have to be good up front. And we saw this year when State played Miami, and everybody who played Miami has been completely overwhelmed up front, including Ohio State. So, and then Notre Dame. But That's the approach. And last thing I want to say, the sky, everybody worried about the receivers leaving. 2 years ago, it probably would have bothered you and I, but I think we're both in the agreement now. NC State has to build this thing inside out. They can't afford to mess around and worry about the shiny things. Because be honest, Cory, the 5-star and the top receivers in the country, those guys are going to command way too much money. Let's just call it what it is, $2 and $3 million. I saw an offensive lineman today who's going to get $3 million. I mean, that's from an SEC program. I mean, that's a lot of money. So the money has gotten out of control. NC State's got to get peak and all the offensive linemen back in the fold. And then, of course, C.J. Bailey. But then the guard position needs to be an area of focus.
Yes, sir. Well, I think that'll just about wrap this one up. I know you've got somewhere to be. We've got some more stories to write. But thank you to everybody for listening. Michael, I appreciate you for jumping on. Also want to give a quick shout out, by the way, to Chris Hummer, Matt Zenitz. They're already working hard. Already have the news out there for any NC State fans. Go give them a follow on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, over on, this morning so that you have updates instantly. Also, I forgot to plug the new site too, Pack Power 247. If you haven't already followed us on all social media channels, make sure that you do that. If you want to jump on board, still 30% off for 1 year. So do make sure that you check that out. Thank you to everybody for listening.